Welcome into the RotoWire PGA Rundown Show. I am your host, Ryan Andrade. Joining me, as always, is my fellow golf writer at RotoWire, Mr. Len Hochberg. Today, we'll be previewing all things fantasy golf for this week's Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches. We'll talk some DFS. We'll talk some best bets. We'll talk some one and done. But first, Len, let's kind of touch on what we saw last week at the Genesis Invitational. It was the second signature event in a row. We were back at Riviera. Jacob Bridgman gets it done. Had a 6-shot lead going into Sunday. Pretty much used all of it. Those last few holes, I'm sure, were very, very stressful for him. Just your thoughts on the week as a whole. I know you were out there for a little bit, and Bridgman's performance as well.
Ryan, they were very stressful for me too. I have Jacob Bridgman in both of my fantasy golf leagues that I'm in, including one with you. So yeah, it was nice to see him finish that off. No, I've been expecting good things from him. I think this was a long time coming, or not that long, but he was in the Tour Championship last year. He might have been the most anonymous guy, unknown, Mr. Irrelevant in the Tour Championship, but he clearly was coming. And he talked after winning how he led the tour, led the field in strokes gained approach. And he said, I've never done that anywhere. He's always been a great putter, but he's worked on his iron play throughout the offseason with his coach, Scott Hamilton. And we saw what happened. And if you have a guy who's top 10 in putting, who can be top 10 in approach, that's going to win you a lot of golf tournaments. So it was a very impressive performance. It did get a little bit of a knee knocker there, largely because Kurt Kitayama really charged. Wasn't like Bridgman was blowing up. He wasn't getting birdies. But anyway, it was just a fun tournament, and Riviera looked fantastic. It had a lot of rain earlier in the week, but the course was spectacular.
Yeah, it was great theater on Sunday. We saw a hole in one. We saw Rory hole one from the bunker shot, all within a matter of seconds, it seemed like. So yeah, it was great. Jacob Bridgman, obviously, we've talked about him a bunch this year. Just playing some great golf. I think this win, you never know how a first win is going to affect people, right? Sometimes they sort of rest on their laurels a little bit, and it can take them a little while to get back into the groove of things. But honestly, I expect a lot from Bridgman. I really like his game. I think he could be this year's Ben Griffin. We saw Ben Griffin last year get his first win, reel off 3 victories. So definitely excited to see what he still has in store. There was obviously it was signature event, so a lot of other big names were in the field. Rory McIlroy had a run at it. Man, he had a lot of putts on Sunday, I feel like, that were so close, and then finally gets that one on 18 to fall in, putting on just a ball striking clinic for most of the week. And then Scotty Scheffler again. We talked about this last week, Len. We were like, we're not too worried about this. 2 straight weeks of starting off slow, and here he does it again. There was a point on Thursday where he was +5, dead last in this field. What did you think about his week, and just what do we say about these slow starts on Thursdays?
Well, it's starting to become a thing, and he really maybe has not had time to sit back and analyze it and try and figure it out. I think he will be spending this 1 week off before playing Bay Hill next week. He will spend this week trying to figure out, what is it? My routine? Am I not eating a good meal the night before? Am I not getting a good night's sleep? Whatever it is, but he's definitely been coming out. I think this is 3 tournaments in a row, and he managed to work his way into the top 10 twice, but not this time, breaking his streak. But you can't come back from. It's like the old Tour Championship. You're starting 8 strokes back. It's hard to come back and do it. So. I would be very surprised if it happens again. I mean that when I was half kidding, but I do mean it, that I think he will spend this week trying to figure out what to do differently to make sure it doesn't happen again. And he's pretty good at figuring things out on the golf course.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you just hope it doesn't get in his head, right? I feel like that it's sort of just more of a mental block than anything, because obviously, he's still playing great golf. The fact that he's able to get over these slow starts and still, pick up these good finishes. I mean, yeah, he broke his top 10 streak this week, but he was still T12, and by the time he finished, he was in the top 10. But nonetheless, none of these guys will be in the field this week, Len. This is a very different type of tournament for sure than some of the ones we've seen recently. This is by far the weakest field we've seen all year. I think Ryan Gerard is the highest ranked player in this field at number 26, the OWGR. How do we handle this week? It was a weak field to begin with. Ben Griffin, Jacob Bridgman, Adam Scott, they all withdrew on Monday too. So, what can we expect from this week? And, to just talk about, I guess, PGA National a little bit as well too.
Well, the tournament's been wide open for a number of years. The field's been getting worse and worse. I mean, people of a certain age remember the old Honda. I mean, Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy battling on Sunday. It used to be an incredible tournament. And under the backdrop of PGA National, where 250 balls a year would be going in the water on 15 holes. So it's really a shame. I mean, that probably contributed to Honda leaving. It was, Honda was synonymous, the Honda, with this tournament. Now it's the Cognizant, doesn't quite roll off your tongue the same way. But yeah, not only are there no players in the top 25 and only 8 of the top 50, but it really screwed up the DraftKings scoring by the late withdrawals of those 3 guys, Griffin and Bridgman and Adam Scott, after the prices round. So there were no 10,000 guys. Maybe that will end up being a positive in terms of being able to, craft a lineup, but it just threw everything out of whack. It was just a terrible blow to a tournament that didn't have a lot going for it. The thing about PGA National, it used to be one of the hardest courses on tour, always in the top 10 of the hardest. Very often single digits would win the tournament. But the last 3 years, 14 under Chris Kirk, 17 under Austin Eckroat, 19 under Joe Highsmith, of all people. What has happened to PGA National? They turned it from a 70 into a 71, but it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. That would be 4 strokes. It's almost 10 shots easier than it usually is. This year, they've made some changes. They've lengthened 2. They've lengthened 18. 18 used to be a kind of a pushover after the bear trap, 15 to 17. It was a short par 5. Now it's almost 600 yards. So they also grew the rough a half inch, normally 2.5 up to 3. So maybe it'll play a little bit tougher, but the over-under is still 16.5 on golfodds.com. They're not expecting a huge change. So this tournament is just wide open.
Yeah, I think what sort of happened is you had a lot of these players that were complaining about PGA National was just too tough. And, in the last couple of years, we've seen they widen a bunch of fairways. They took some of the fairway bunkers out. And they also put the overseed on. Last year was the first year they did that and made it, it's a lot more green than it used to be, but it's also a lot softer. Balls stop faster on the fairway, stop faster on the greens. I know that was a big point of contention for, guys that have played this tournament a lot, like Billy Horschel. He was really upset about it, just because he's used to these Bermuda grasses and some of the weird kicks and stuff you get off of that. But definitely a lot easier. I think they probably went for this trying to attract some of these top players, and it hasn't really happened. So I kind of wish they would just kind of go back to the way it was before and not do the overseed. But who knows with all the scheduling questions going into 27 and 28, where this tournament ends up falling. I think since there's not that many big names in this field, one that I think we have to talk about is Brooks Koepka. Hasn't been, the best of starts so far. I think he has a T56 and a miscut. But this is a tournament. He's played well here before. He's from the area, lives in the area. So any thoughts on Brooks this week?
Yeah, really wanted to put Brooks Koepka in the article. Well, he is in the article. Really wanted to make him a pick. He's 9,000 on DraftKings. He's one of the highest guys, in the betting market as well. I don't think I'm ready to do that. Usually what happens with me when in these situations, I will wait on a guy. I'd rather be 1 week late than be wrong for like 4 weeks in a row until he's there. And so I'm still concerned about Brooks Koepka. He is 171st on the PGA Tour in strokes gained putting. There are only 172 guys in the rankings. He's doing a lot of other things well, but I don't see how you can do much of anything when you're 171st in putting. We know he's not that bad of a putter, and he's got to figure it out. And presumably he hasn't played for 3 weeks. I would imagine he spent, much like Scotty Scheffler is going to figure out how to get out there on Thursday and do well. I think he's probably spent 3 weeks trying to figure out the putter and maybe trying some new putters. Don't know, but we'll see. I suspect he will do better. The tour would really love that. Cognizant would really like that for TV ratings and all of that. It would just be a fun story. But I'm going to have to still wait and see on Brooks Koepka until he does something before jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, I think this is a big week for him for sure. Just because if you're going out there this week, that's really the guy that you're going to watch, because there's not really much else to watch, honestly. And I think this is a big week for him, knowing that it's a weaker field. He needs to go out there, and if he could get even a top 20, top 15, I think that would be huge for his confidence going forward into the players and the Masters. So. All right, let's dive right into the DFS tiers here. And you mentioned it earlier, Len, when they published these salaries, that was before Ben Griffin, Jacob Bridgman, Adam Scott all withdrew. So that really kind of does mix things up towards the top of the board. I mean, with no players in the 10K range, how does that kind of just affect your strategy for drafting a team?
Well, it could let you avoid, the bottom there. This field is only 123. It's not 144, which I think it used to be. I don't know how it got to 123. They were shrinking all the fields. So there are fewer bad golfers in the field, but the 6,000s are pretty darn barren, and we will get to that eventually. And so maybe if you're playing one or two guys in the nines, you can avoid one or two guys in the sixes and keep it into the sevens, which isn't maybe a whole lot better. But yeah, it definitely throws a wrinkle in things. And Shane Lowry now at 9,900 is going to be, I don't do this sort of thing. There are people who sort of track ownership levels and stuff like that, but just the eye test tells me he's going to be one of the most popular guys in a single tournament that we're going to see all year in all formats, betting, DFS, one and done. But he's been great in this tournament, so there is some, reason for that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That was actually one of the points I was going to bring up earlier. I think Lowry, just given his record here, he's played well so far in 2026. Just the course fit. He might be the most popular player in any format this week. I can definitely see that. Just going down the leaderboard or the DraftKings board here, I just wanted to touch on a few guys that stood out to me. And, Len, we were talking before we got on, about a lot of us, I do the FanDuel article. Obviously, you do the DraftKings one. Both of us had a lot of, international European players that we featured here. And two that I had my eye on was Jordan Smith at 7,800. He's been one of the best iron players on the DP World Tour for years. This is rookie year on the PGA Tour. He's coming off a T16 at TPC Scottsdale, another course that features overseeded Bermuda. Putted very, very well on those greens too. So I like him at 7,800. I also like John Perry at 7,500. This is a guy. He's a 39-year-old rookie. He's come out here. It's tough to come off the DP World Tour and have success, but he's made the cut in all 4 starts so far this year. And a week like this, that's kind of like all you can really count on, is just getting guys through to the weekend here. He was 5th last season on the DP World Tour in strokes gained approach, and he was also top 30 in strokes gained around the green and scrambling, which is always something to keep an eye on here. Anybody else in the low 7K range and maybe even down into the 6K range you like this week on DraftKings?
I do like both of those guys. I have them both in my article, and I think it's hard to come over. I don't think we think this through a whole lot. They're playing on the DP World Tour. John Parry, who's 39, he's now here a rookie. They come to a new country. I mean, at least for him, it's the same language, but he has to get used to traveling, airports, hotels, food is different. The cadence of the PGA Tour is different. They may be traveling by themselves. Their family may not be with them. All these things are relevant for them. And they both, Jordan Smith and John Parry, have done a great job coming over and playing well. And what I like about them also is they're a little bit older. This is a course where you have to be patient. You can't just be going and hitting it as far as you want and maybe end up in the rough and then you can wedge it out onto the green, because you won't be in the rough, you'll be in the water. So I like guys who are a little bit older. Maybe they've been through the wars a little bit. They've gone through the, they didn't come up in the just grip it and rip it age and stuff. So I do like them. Sam Ryder is another guy who's a little bit older, probably in his mid-30s by now. He's made 5 cuts in a row here. He's 7,300. I want to see what Johnny Kiefer is going to do. He's played okay so far. He's up at 7,800, kind of probably a fair price. But, he's had a couple of good weeks. He's 4 for 4 in cuts, but hasn't had many high top finishes, no top 25s. This could be a tournament where he could sort of break through, not necessarily to win, but at least to, make his mark on the PGA Tour. He was the big Korn Ferry player from last year. In the 6,000s, it really was a struggle. I picked 2 guys who totaled 1 cut made so far in 2026. Bo Hostler at 6,900. He's played this tournament every year, or a lot of years. He makes the cut every year. He hasn't made the cut on the PGA Tour yet, but he's still under 100 to 1, which I found interesting. The guy who hasn't made a cut on the tour yet this year is under 100 to 1. We know he can get hot with the putter. We know he's a good putter. And Austin Smotherman, he really stood out to me at 6,500. He's made 1 cut, but he's 3rd on tour in strokes gained approach. Very often in the 6,000s, there's nothing to like about any of these guys. If you find one guy that you like one thing about, sometimes for me, that's enough to put him in a lineup, because the one thing I like is more than the other guy where there's no things I like. So Austin Smotherman, I don't know. I'm looking for maybe sneaky things out of him this week. More than half the field will make the cut. 65 in ties in a field of 123. There will be a lot of 6,000s making the cut.
Yeah, that's a great point. You look on paper at all these guys and, not a lot stands out to you down there, but, a bunch of these guys will make the cut, and there's a good chance that, a few of them might be contending on Sunday for this one. That's just kind of how it goes. For me, honestly, I feel like when I go through really far down the board, you're not ever going to get somebody that checks, all 3 boxes, that checks, the profile you want, the course history, the recent history. You kind of got to mix and match. I tend to get this far. I think you're looking towards more course history, maybe just, a guy that hasn't started off the year well. I mean, we still are like extremely early, right? And, I think it's also important to mention that, we've played every single event on the West Coast and Hawaii so far. These are completely different grasses, completely different conditions. If you're a guy that had a bad start, I don't think you can get too caught up in it, because, Florida golf is a lot different, and, there's going to be more skill sets that are, going to fall into your favor. So, one guy I looked here was Blades Brown, just because, I think he's an interesting storyline. Obviously, 18-year-old, had a great performance at the Amex early this year, almost won that one. Do you have any thoughts on Blades Brown at all at 6,800? That seems like a pretty decent price for him.
I'm thinking that tournament organizers and the PGA Tour would like him to get some major TV time on Sunday. Yeah, that would be a great story for the tour. I don't have him in my article, but you're right. He did have one great tournament already this year. He's still figuring out a lot of things. We talked about a 30-year-old or a 39-year-old traveling for work in a new country. Well, he's not in a new country, but what is he, 18, traveling? He's probably traveling with his mom still or something. I don't know if he's out there traveling on his own. So it's got to be a tough thing to get out on tour and to and negotiate all those other things. But he's got an incredible amount of talent, and it would be really a special story for him to be on TV on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you can almost book him for. I don't think the PGA Tour has put out the pairings yet, but you can basically book it that he's going to be in a featured group on Thursday and Friday. We'll probably see a lot of him, as they should. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other guys that they can put in there, so definitely would be cool to see that. Let's transition over to the betting board as I pull up the odds on DraftKings here, and we got co-favorites, Shane Lowry, Ryan Gerard. They are at plus 1950. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of these not round numbers. I don't know about you, Lan. I don't know if DraftKings did something recently, but whenever I see them now, they've got all these wonky numbers in here, and it's fine. It's just it makes it a lot more difficult to talk about.
They make me put on my glasses when I have to go look at them now, because what is that? It's not a nice zero there at the end. So yeah, I don't know what that. I don't know what's up with that. I thought that was a 1 week thing, but apparently not.
Yeah. But anyways, so those guys are the two favorites. I'm a little surprised Lowry isn't a little bit lower and, in front of Gerard. Gerard's obviously been playing really, really well, but Lowry just has such a good record here, and he's also playing well. We talked about Brooks Koepka earlier, and I'm sure, there's going to be lots of people that want to bet Brooks Koepka. Do you think he's at 28-1? You think that's too high? You think that's too low? Or you think that's just about right?
It might be a smidge. It's not too low. It might be a smidge too high and high-low. I mean, I think maybe in the 30s, 35, 38, 38.3 to make DraftKings happy or something, however they want to, put an exact number on things. So yeah, but I get it. And then, it's like the all effect with Jordan Spieth. I think the number, sort of changes because they know there's going to be so much interest. They know that there are going to be a lot of people betting Brooks Koepka this week. So I believe that they will lower that number a little bit to maybe protect themselves and maybe to get more people on board for Brooks Koepka because they don't think he's going to win. So I think it's a little bit low. I think it's a little bit too high a number. I think the odds should be a little bit longer. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Longer, shorter.
Yeah. I mean, he's still 159 on Data Golf, which is, obviously he hasn't. Most of the stuff in there is, live results in last year where, I'm sure he doesn't really care if he finishes T3 or T63. They don't even have 63 players, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Koepka, he's obviously going to draw a lot of action, especially in this field for sure. Guys that, stand out to me here, Nikolai Højgaard. I think, I feel like a lot of these places, they just put the Højgaards right next to each other just because they can't distinguish between the two of them. They're both 2,200 here on DraftKings. I do like Nikolai a little bit more. I feel like he's really, really close to getting that first PGA Tour win. He was T3 last time out at TPC Scottsdale. He's been T22 or better in 6 of his last 7 starts, just going back to last fall on the DP World Tour. He's leading the PGA Tour this year in strokes gained off the tee. And I think he's been a great iron player over the last 12 months. So I'm really high on him. Len, anybody else towards the top that, stand out to you?
Well, he's going to be my one and done pick, and I do have him in my article, and he really has played better this year. And he was, again, along the things that we've been talking about, a young kid, young man coming here to a foreign country a couple of years ago. What was he, 18, 19? Well, I don't know even how old is he now. He's still a young guy. And it might just take adjustment to learn the ropes of travel and food and hotels and the grind of the PGA Tour, but he's playing much better this year. And I do like his chances this week. I'm going to zig where everyone zags to Shane Lowry, but I did look at Rasmus too, and Rasmus is playing very well as well. So I think they both are where they should be in terms of the betting odds. And it would not surprise me if Rasmus had the better week. But I do like Nikolai more. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. I like to how you mentioned that, especially these guys coming in from the DP World Tour. He's had a PGA Tour card for a couple of years, and he's played PGA National before. I think it gets a lot easier for those guys once they go to these tournaments for a second, third year in a row, just to sort of get the feel of what to expect. They come in and it's already a big, adjustment to just how much better the competition is on the PGA Tour, but also just the fact that all these guys have played these same courses for years and years and years. So, that's also something to think about. If we look at any sort of placement bets that stand out to you, top 20, top 10, anything on the board here?
Another DP World Tour guy, Hao Tong Lee, veteran guy, been around a decade. His first year on the PGA Tour, playing very well, has had some good finishes. I'm looking at my notes, 8th at the Amex, 11th at the Farmers. What it not only did were those two good finishes, but two completely different golf courses, two completely different golf tournaments, to be able to play well in both. That tells me there's a lot going on right in his game. Very accurate driver, which is important this week with so much water out there. He's plus 184 on DraftKings for a top 20. I do like him there. His putting is not great. He's ranked 129th in putting. I think when we look at some of these numbers, a guy that's 129th in putting, but probably half of those guys who are ahead of him are not playing this week. So maybe he's only like 60th in this field in putting or something. I'm just throwing out numbers, but I think the 129, if he played in a major, yes, he'd be really up against the best putters and stuff. I don't think that's the case this week.
Yeah, I actually had a Hao Tong Lee written down as well. I am for a top 10 at plus 390. Just he's another great ball striker, 8th in strokes gained tee to green last season on the DP World Tour, and he was he was top 20 in greens and regulation percentage and scrambling as well. So yeah, and I think another thing is there's not a lot of players in this field who have racked up a lot of good finishes so far, and you mentioned the good showing at the Amex and the Farmers. You talked about him earlier as well, but Sam Ryder I had for a top 20 at plus 345. I thought that was a great number. He doesn't have a lot of data to go off of this season, but he is right now top 5 in both strokes gained approach and strokes gained putting. That's a pretty lethal combination. Great record at PGA National, pair of top 10s and a T21. So I'll take Sam Ryder for a top 20. Let's see. Let's get on over to one and done. Len, you kind of already teased it that you're going to pick Nikolai Hochberg here. Last week neither of us did very good. I was super, super, super high on Victor Hovland and just had a terrible, terrible putting week. You, I believe, were on Hideki. I actually looked at the stats for Hideki last week. He was T2 in driving actually and T48 in greens and regulation. He did not turn that great driving week, which is honestly something that he has struggled with for a long time, the driving accuracy.
Right.
But he did not convert that into very many birdie looks. So we both got some ground to make up.
Yeah, Hideki was right in the middle of the pack. He never made a run. I was going to go to Tommy Fleetwood. I ended up not wanting to burn Tommy Fleetwood. I didn't think Tommy Fleetwood was going to win. I guess if you don't think a guy is going to win, even though he finished what did he finish?
I think T7.
So that's not a big deal in one and done. That's not going to move you up the leaderboard very, very far, especially as the season goes on and stuff. So at least I still have Tommy Fleetwood and could play him in a major at some point, maybe the Open Championship. Who knows? Or even the U.S. Open, where he has played very well through the years. I'll throw one other thing out. I do an article. I contribute to an article that's on bookies.com every week, where we are asked to pick a winner, a top 20, a long shot, and a first round leader. I'll just throw out that my first round leader pick is John Parry, the aforementioned John Parry, 39 years old. He's played 4 tournaments. All 4 rounds have been in the 60s on Thursday for him. It's nice to see that you get off to a good start. He's 11th in greens in regulation, 35th in putting. In this field, that could probably get you in the Hall of Fame. So I'm going to take a flyer on him. He's shot 64, 67, 67, 69. He's probably going to have to be closer to that 64 to be first round leader. But that's kind of a fun bet that some people like to play as well.
I like that, Lynn. That's good stuff here. Yeah, I obviously this week it's a non-signature event, so it's basically little less than half of the purses of the last 2 weeks. So feels inconsequential, but hey, if you pick the winner, I think it's 1.7 million that gets added, so that definitely helps. I'm going Nikolai Højgaard as well. I really like him, and I think everybody, I could see 50% of your league that you play in, maybe even more, being on Shane Lowry this week, just given that I don't think he's ever going to be this much of a favorite in a field again, just given his record here. But I really like Højgaard. He's just had a lot of high finishes of late, and I think just with the way PGA National set up now with the overseed, with the fairways a little bit wider, I think that's going to play right into his hands. So me and Lynn are aligned this week. We will either go down with the ship, or we will both be on top by this time next week. We'll see what happens. Let's see here. I think the only other thing I had was score predictions this week. Lynn, I don't know if you looked at the weather at all, but it looks like Thursday's gonna be pretty good, and then Friday through Sunday a little bit dicey, maybe. What do you think about score this week?
I did notice that last night, the temperature was supposed to drop into the 30s, the upper 30s, but by the tournament time, it should be around 80. Should be. It's always going to be windy. The wind forecast was around 15 miles an hour every day. That's pretty standard. Weather could move in the form of rain on the weekend. The over-under on golfodds.com, as I mentioned earlier, 16.5. I'm going to think it goes higher than that. I think we could, get 17 to 19 under. Again, they've tried to make some changes to make the course harder. We'll see if it works. It seems like whatever they've been doing has just been sending the course in the opposite direction the last few years, whether intentional or not.
Yeah, I agree. That's funny that was the number, because I did write down 16 under. I think the weather the last couple of years, I remember the weather here being just great. Little bit of another wrench to watch out for. Thursday obviously looks like it's gonna be great, but Friday maybe we got to see if one side of the draw is better than the other. Sometimes we get into Florida, and you got to start watching for that kind of stuff. So
yep.
I think that will just about do it for us. Next week we'll be back Tuesday, the normal time, noon Eastern. We'll recap everything that we saw this week at the Cognizant Classic. We'll look ahead to another signature event, the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill. All the best players should be back in the field after taking this week off. So should be a great one. It'll be the final two before the players as well. If you want to follow me or Lynn on X, you can follow us at Roto_Ryan for myself, and then at Lynn Hochberg. We will catch you all next week.